What would happen if everything that made you you, your home, your language, your routines, and your sense of belonging, was suddenly taken away? Not slowly, and not over time, but all at once. Today, I want you to imagine that just for a moment. Not as a statistic, not as a headline, but as a feeling. Because for millions of people affected by the Syrian Civil War, this isn't hypothetical, it's real. Hi, my name is Achal Rati, and I am currently an international relations student studying at King's College London. This episode focuses in on something that is often underrepresented: identity. This is not just who we are, but what happens when that identity is disrupted, fractured, or even lost. And more importantly, how people begin to rebuild it. I'm going to talk about Syrian refugees, but I also want this to feel personal, because identity, belonging, connection, those aren't distant concepts. They're human needs that we all share. Let's start with something simple. Think about your daily life, the food that you eat, and the language that you speak, and the places that you go without thinking, and the people that you see. All of that is culture. It shapes your identity in ways you probably don't even notice. Now imagine losing it. Except this is probably near impossible for many of us in reality. When the war in Syria began in 2011, it didn't just destroy buildings, it disrupted entire ways of living. Homes were lost, communities were broken, millions of people were forced to leave everything behind. And with that came something deeper: a loss of identity. One Syrian woman named Fadia described it like this: "Our identity as Syrian women has become intertwined with this narrative of war." Think about that. Your identity no longer defined by who you are, but by what you've been through. Today, over 12 million Syrians have been displaced. That's not just movement, that's disruption to each and every single one of those 12 million people. Because when people are displaced, they don't just lose their homes, they lose belonging, community, familiarity, and often their sense of self. And when they arrive somewhere new, they face another challenge. They're no longer seen as individuals, they're seen as something else: refugees, a label, a category, expectations. But behind that word are people who were once students, artists, professionals, parents, people with identities that go far beyond displacement, and people with credentials that are then ignored. So how do you rebuild identity when everything familiar is gone? For many Syrians, part of that answer exists online. Social media might seem small and something that we can live without, but in this context, it becomes something much more powerful. It allows people to stay connected with their families, share their stories, learn about the new country, culture, language that they are becoming used to, and express who they are. But more than that, it helps recreate something that's been lost: connection. One woman, Haifa, a 34-year-old who worked as a seamstress in Syria, described what this looks like in her everyday life. She said that because now my family has Wi-Fi, we became able to talk with them and see them, so I feel as they live with us. Just think about that for a second. Not next door, not in the same city, but through a screen, and it feels like they're still there. And it's not just about staying in touch, it's about the emotional support that this can provide. Another refugee, Zoho, a 30-year-old karate teacher who later opened her own training space in the Netherlands, explained how important that visual connection is. She said, "It facilitates our contact with others. I can talk with my family, and I can also see them through the camera, so things become easier." That word, easier, stands out because nothing about displacement is easy. But these small moments, seeing someone's face, hearing their voice, speaking in your language, feeling like you're still part of something, they matter more than we often realize. And this is where digital identity becomes something deeper. It's not just about posting online, it's not just about communication, it's about rebuilding relationships, belonging, and your sense of self in a world where everything else has been disrupted. But identity isn't only rebuilt online. There's another deeper layer to this: culture. After years of conflict, Syrians have started to rebuild cultural spaces through art, writing, music, and community traditions. And this matters more than it might seem, because culture isn't just expression, it's memory, it's belonging, and most importantly, it's continuity. Workshops, local events, and cultural initiatives are just some of what is trying to restore what happened before the war. And this is helping communities to reconnect, not just economically, but emotionally. They allow people to move from surviving to rebuilding and to finally being in control of their own narrative, identity, and culture. And I think this is where it becomes personal, because even if we haven't experienced war, we all understand what it feels like to question who we are, to feel disconnected, to try to belong, to rebuild something after something difficult, and to rebuild ourselves. However, now just take this relatability and just apply it on a completely unimaginable and different magnitude, where you are in a new country, completely unfamiliar to you, speaking in a different language after losing everything familiar to you. Although we could relate to the basic essence of losing your identity or questioning your identity, we have to understand the privilege that we hold, and we have to convert this into empathy for others. The story of Syrian refugees is often told through numbers. Millions displaced, billions needed, but those numbers don't tell you what's really at stake: identity, belonging, voice. Recovery isn't just about rebuilding cities, it's about rebuilding people. And sometimes that starts with something simple, like being seen and being heard, and being able to say, "This is who I am." Thank you for listening. If this made you think differently, even for a moment, that matters. And I think maybe next time you hear the word refugee, you'll think of something more than that, just the label. And you'll think about what each person goes through, their hardships, and what they have to overcome. You'll think of a story.